Nope.
Welcome, dear listener. I would like to start by thanking you for joining me for this week's video. Being an American means I'm familiar with our own set of folktales and horror-driven urban legends. You've probably heard of them too. Candyman, Bloody Mary, the Boogeyman, etc. But what about our friends over in Japan? If you're even slightly a fan of horror, then you've probably encountered Japanese horror in some way, shape, or form, whether it be movies, video games, television, etc. In this video, I'll be sharing with you 5 terrifying Japanese folktales. Being American also means that I'm probably going to mispronounce many of the names included in these stories, so bear with me as I try my best. Make sure to smack that like button if you enjoy what you hear. Let's get started. Number 1. The White String. It must be tough to be a young woman in Japan. It seems that most urban legends are targeted toward instilling fear in the female youth. The story of the White String is no exception to this trend. According to the legend, a young woman in the 1980s wanted to get her ears pierced. After pleading with her parents for permission, they relented and gave her the money she would need for the service. The girl decided she would instead keep the money for herself and have her friend perform the piercing. The friend took a sharp needle, heated it up, and stuck it through the lobe of the girl. Though painful, it had seemingly gotten the job done. A few days later, the girl was at school when she began to feel an irritation around her ear. After scratching, she realized her piercing was the main source of the pain. After excusing herself to the bathroom, the girl inspected her ear. The lobe was red and swollen. She proceeded to scratch and scratch until the girl saw something begin to protrude from the tiny hole. She slowly and carefully pulled at it, trying to remove whatever had gotten inside. Eventually, she thought it would be easier to simply snip the white string and deal with it another time. She retrieved a pair of scissors, placed the white string between her blades, and pressed down. Instantly, her world went dark. The girl was rushed to the hospital, where a doctor performed a series of tests to diagnose the problem. When he found it, he sat her up and tried his best to explain what she had done. What she heard sent her mind spinning. It wasn't a white string she had cut. It was her optic nerve. She would be blind for the rest of her life. Number 2. The Icicle Wife. The bitter romance between Futakuchi-onna, otherwise known as the Icicle Wife, is also well known as a Japanese folktale. The story begins with an unmarried man who lived alone in a remote area of Japan. Single and lonely, the man wanted nothing more than a wife. As he stared out of his window one cold winter night, he noticed a set of icicles had formed outside of his house. As he gazed at them, he wished out loud for a wife as beautiful as the icicles. That same night, he heard a knocking at his door, and to his surprise, on the other side was a lost wanderer who sought shelter. The wanderer was a beautiful woman, slender as an icicle with skin as white as snow. The two hit it off, fell in love, and decided she would live with him as his wife. They were happy together and things were great. The man only noticed one issue with his new companion. She never bathed. When he inquired as to why, she refused to answer. After a while, the man lost his patience and decided she needed to bathe. He picked her up and walked her to a bath he had drawn. Despite her protests, kicking and screaming the whole way, the man managed to put his wife in the hot bath. After doing so, he turned around and slammed the door behind him. After some time had passed, he decided he would go back to check on her. As he approached, he noticed she had quieted down dramatically. The bathroom was completely silent. He opened the door and found nothing in the tub but water and the small hair tie that his wife always wore. He cursed himself for his behavior, assuming the woman had fled from the bathroom window. He awaited her return for days. Days became weeks, and weeks became months, until he finally accepted that she would never return. In that time, he met another woman who became his new wife. She moved into his home, and things went well, until winter rolled around once more. The man stared out of his window, staring at an abnormally large icicle hanging from the side of his home. After going outside to get a closer look, he noticed someone standing in the snow. He realizes that the familiar face belongs to his first wife and goes to confront her. When the new wife realized her husband was not inside, she looked out of the window to search for him. To her horror, out in the snow lay the body of her husband. Warm blood ran from the man's head and stained the white snow around him. He was dead, impaled through the eye by the same large icicle he went to investigate. Number 3. Red Crayon. Red Crayon is an urban legend that tells the story of a young couple moving into their first home. The couple had been newlyweds and were looking to purchase their first home. After doing some research, they found a beautiful and quaint home in an excellent location at an unbelievably low price. Things started off normal, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary until one day the husband spotted something on the floor. A small red crayon. Confused, as the couple did not have any children, the husband ignored the discovery and tossed out the crayon. The next day, after returning home from work, the husband stumbled across the same red crayon in the exact same spot on the floor he had found it earlier. Thinking his wife had removed the crayon from the trash, he questioned her. Upon hearing about the crayon, the wife grew visibly afraid and shaken. She too had been seeing the crayon in the same spot, despite moving it or throwing it away. Curious as ever, the husband wandered to the spot of the hallway that the crayon kept reappearing to investigate. After studying the area for a little, he noticed some inconsistencies in the wall. He knocked on the wall and heard it echo back as if it were hollow. He immediately began to remove the wallpaper that adorned the surface to reveal a hidden pair of sliding doors. The couple was baffled as they were never told of an additional room when purchasing the home. Wanting to desperately get to the bottom of this ordeal, the husband went to work on the doors, using a hammer to remove all the nails that forced them shut. One by one, he plucked them out of the wall until he was able to slide it open. He cautiously peeked into the musty room that laid before him. He noticed it was cramped with white walls. Among the walls, written repeatedly in red crayon, were the words, "Mommy, I'm sorry. Let me out. Mommy, I'm sorry. Let me out. Mommy, I'm sorry. Let me out." Number 4. Futakuchi-onna. The urban legend of Futakuchi-onna describes a young woman who is cursed with 2 mouths, one normal and another monstrous mouth in the back of her head. While Futakuchi herself is thought to be very quiet and described as having a small mouth, her second mouth is said to open wide, revealing sharp, mangled teeth and a wild, rotting tongue. The origin of Futakuchi started when a man lost his wife, who was the mother of his young daughter. Not long after her death, he remarried to a young woman who bore him another little girl. That new wife was Futakuchi. Being a jealous and bitter woman, Futakuchi never loved or even liked the first daughter. Due to the family being in poverty, food was limited. Futakuchi decided to only feed her daughter instead of sharing the small amount of food they had with the first daughter. Eventually, the little girl died of starvation. Sometime after her death, Futakuchi was helping her husband chop wood. At some point, he swung his razor-sharp axe back too wide and sliced the back of Futakuchi's head wide open. For some reason, despite the brutal wound and unimaginable amount of blood, Futakuchi survived the accident. They nursed the wound for a long time, but it never healed. It just remained open. It wasn't long until the painful wound began to grow teeth and a tongue, and even developed the ability to speak. Terrified by his wife's insidious deformity, Futakuchi's husband left her. The new mouth began to harass its host, demanding it be fed to satisfy its vigorous appetite. It is thought that the wound was formed as a punishment for starving her innocent stepdaughter to death. Others claim it was the vengeful spirit of the daughter that controls the mouth. Another part of the legend explains how the second mouth has the ability to control Futakuchi's hair, using the strands as tentacle-like arms to grab at food to feed itself. Number 5. Oiwa. Amongst the legion of bone-chilling Japanese urban legends, the story of Oiwa is said to be the most famous. Oiwa was a young, loving, and faithful woman who married a man named Iman. Oiwa was happy with Iman, despite their undeniable poverty, and had become pregnant with his child. Iman, on the other hand, was not so content. When the opportunity presented itself for Iman to marry a wealthy woman named Yume, he began to devise a sinister plan to rid himself of Oiwa. While the two sat for dinner one night, Oiwa noticed Iman was acting strange. Upon questioning his odd behavior, Iman brushed off her suspicion and urged her to eat up as she needed her strength for the baby. As you may have guessed, Iman's plan had begun to unfold. He had poisoned the food. The poison he had used was supposed to kill Oiwa. It had failed to go that far, and had instead disfigured her face. It made her eyes sag, her skin bleed, and her hair fall out. And worst of all, it caused her to lose the unborn baby she had been carrying. These results only made Iman more desperate to try to end things in a hurry. He took Oiwa, who was still not suspicious of her husband, on a walk along a high mountain. After ensuring they were alone, Iman pushed his trusting wife off the cliff to her death. She died on February 22nd, 1636. There was not much suspicion of a murder in the community. Any possible shreds of it were washed away by Iman's charade of sorrow and the beautiful funeral ceremony he had pulled together. The night before Iman's second wedding, where he would be marrying the wealthy Yume, he noticed the lamp near his bed went black. Upon inspection, the lamp was replaced by the disfigured face of his deceased wife, shouting at the wicked man, "Betrayal! Betrayal!" Iman quickly reached for his sword and slashed at the apparition. The sword instead smashed through the lamp, leaving it broken into pieces in front of him. Eamon was shaken, but chalked up the hallucination to stress, fatigue, and, of course, alcohol. The day came for Eamon to marry Yume. After his new bride approached the eager groom, he reached to her dainty figure and removed her veil. In place of Yume's smiling face was the same horrifying image from the night before. Oiwa. She revealed a horrid smile before breathing out a familiar betrayal and cackling uncontrollably. Breaking from his terror-filled trance, Eamon once again drew his sword and slashed at the haunting display before him. The blade sliced through clean. In front of everyone, Eamon had decapitated Yume. Overwhelmed with fear and confusion, Eamon made a mad dash back to his home. Not long after arriving and securing the door behind him, a knock was heard from the other side. The voice of Yume's grandfather shouted from outside, demanding Eamon open up the door and explain himself. Reluctant but plagued with guilt, he opened the door. Once again, Oiwa's wide smile stood before him. It began hissing, "Betrayal! Betrayal!" until it was shouting. Yet again, Eamon drew his blade and slashed. Off came the head of Yume's grandfather. As the head rolled away, Eamon could still hear the laughter of his dead wife. Not knowing where else to go, Eamon ran for the cliffs where he had killed Oiwa. Upon reaching the top, he had reportedly leaped to his death, though some spectators say he was pushed by a woman who proceeded to fall after him, laughing and cackling the whole way down. According to some iterations of this legend, Oiwa's ghost cannot be put to rest. Her hauntings continue, supposedly to this day. A curse is said to fall upon anybody who tells her story. Even now, there are stories of injuries and even death befalling movies or theatrical productions telling her tale. The only way to gain mercy from Oiwa's spirit is to visit her grave in Tokyo. Thank you for listening. This video will kick off a series of additional Japanese urban legends, so hopefully you enjoyed what you heard. If you did, remember to stab that like button. And if you really liked it, remember to subscribe so you can be notified when the next videos about Japanese urban legends is posted. If you have any ideas or suggestions for urban legends, let me know in the comments below. Other than that, have a great day and remember to stay safe out there. I'll be seeing you in the next video.